Okay, hello. This is the added bonus, and this is a topic I haven't covered much, but I think this year, starting this project, it's becoming more relevant and useful. The idea of namespaces, which are a organizational feature that allows you to kind of set up a space within your C# project that it's called a namespace. It's basically you can have items, classes, and things that are restricted access according to a namespace. You've probably seen a little bit of this. And well, let's switch over now. Let's say in your code, you've probably seen. I know you've seen it. Say we're here in the Scarecrow project. Scarecrow, yep. And we have the a player controller for the Scarecrow. And I'm going to just go ahead and show it over here because we don't really need to get into the C# editor much, but we can show it right in here. You'll see, normally you see these things using Unity Engine, using Unity Engine.ui, and you're basically saying this is the namespace that you are using. Okay, so you can refer to things that are in these namespaces within your code, right? So this way, Unity knows in particular which mono behavior, because the mono behavior that you're using is part of this Unity Engine namespace, right? And different things like the Unity Engine UI, things like text components are classes that are within that Unity Engine.ui namespace, okay? So if there happen to be two different things called text, it would know which one to use because you specifically said, okay, here's the namespace that I'm using. Now, in our project, and it's easy to to not need this sort of namespace, but what if? What if you had two classes that somehow had the same name? So, for example, you may instinctively, within your scene, within your project, have multiple classes, potentially called player controller. Like in this case, we have one that's used by sort of our Scarecrow sub-project. Here it is, player controller. In the I've reorganized things in here now a bit, and I'll tell you why in a second. So we have a Scarecrow kind of sub-project. So an assets folder for Scarecrow within here, and in there are the Scarecrow's scripts, which has a player controller in it. And you'll see up here in Adventure, I also have a player controller. Okay, and this player controller looks pretty normal. You know, it looks like a normal script here. It doesn't have anything special around it, no namespaces and whatnot. So one of the interesting things, first off, I should mention this. Playercontroller.cs, playercontroller.cs. Normally, our class name is the same as our file name. Okay, there are ways to get around that, but let's assume that that is the case. And let's see, even in this case, let's go, say we have another, do we have another player controller somewhere in here? I thought I had yet another one. And maybe in scripts. Well, oh, here's another player controller in oh no, that's the one in Adventure. Apple Tree Scripts has player script, and Scarecrow has player controller. All right, so actually, this is by virtue of this capitalization, it's not going to run into too much of a problem here. But let's fix this. Let's say, okay, player controller over here, I have the bug. Right, I should have called this capital player controller. So I'm going to go ahead and make that capital player controller. Okay, and you'll see, hopefully, in the class here, we need to rename that as well. So we're going to go over in here, and we will go ahead and say, yes, this should have been player controller. All right. Now, you'll notice now, here I am in my Scarecrow project, and I have a player controller in that subdirectory, and it's named player controller. And you'll see, if I click on it here, let's see, let's go to Scarecrow scripts player controller, and here it is, player controller. Looks very similar. All right. Now, it's all good, right? And I am using the proper version of the script because in Scarecrow here in my scene, I have dragged in the proper player controller into this, right? So you'll see, yep, that's the one it's using. But the interesting thing is that the classes both have the same name. So how does Unity deal with that? How would I deal with it? Like if I wanted to put the other player controller in here, how would it know which is which and how to keep them from conflicting with one another? Well, let's give that a try. This is going to break. I don't know. This would be weird. Say you'll see it has two player controllers here. I bring this player controller in, and that's the one that's in Scarecrow. So I don't actually want that one. Remove component, add component. We'll grab that one. This is the one that is in the other, in the adventure game, right? Ocean Key, flashlight, and so on. Now, the cool thing is, it's not going to really work because, yeah, it didn't find those things. So it found unreferenced, unreferenced exceptions and things like that because it didn't have a game object for them. But it didn't complain about having these two player controllers that had the same name. And that's because this one is just in the kind of root. It's just in the namespace. It doesn't have anything special going on with this namespace over here. However, the other one, this one up here, we have said namespace Scarecrow and wrapped this class in that namespace, right? So this player controller is specific to, you'll see now it's scarecrow.playerController. That's the fully formed name for this class, scarecrow.playerController, because it's wrapped like that, right? So this way, the Unity engine knows which one to use, and it doesn't, it's nice because now I can have player controller for the Scarecrow project, I have player controller for the Adventure project, and so on. So in the Scarecrow project, I may have other things like bag behavior, which needs to refer to, I think, the Scarecrow player because it wants to increase the score, if I recall correctly. Where's that? Did I say bag behavior? Okay, bag behavior needs player controller.score. There it is. All right, it needs to do this. So how does it know which one? Well, this bag that's dropped, bagbehavior.cs, is also part of that same namespace. It's part of the Scarecrow namespace. So therefore, it's going to assume that the one it wants to use is, where are we here? Scarecrow.playerController, right? That's how it keeps track of things. So using this simple construct, this namespace Scarecrow, allows us to be a little more flexible in terms of naming classes in ways that are sort of consistent to our practices, right? So say we always have a player controller in a scene or in a sub-project, right? It's okay now. We can have different player controller classes. It's, it's, like I said, it's slightly on the unusual side. But, in this case, since this particular project, what we're doing is we are creating an overall master game, right? We have this menu, and then all of our sub-games are underneath here. So it might be useful to have that. So as long as they're kept separate, like you couldn't have two playercontroller.cs files in the same directory. You can't have, the same file name in the same directory. So you do have to kind of split them up. So you'll see like I had apple tree scripts and things in there, and I had adventure, and the scripts are in there. And I should probably have I should create a new folder there, and I'm going to call that scripts. And I'll put the adventure games scripts in there. So that's the nice thing about doing this. We can really kind of, let's see, if the player prefab, so we could have prefabs images depending on how complex each project got. Like you see the apple tree project already has, this actually there's a version 1 and version 2. We'll have to fix this as well. So of the apple tree. And then my third-party ones I just kept up top. Things that I'm sharing across all projects are also up at top. But hopefully my structure makes a little bit more sense. So things that everybody uses are kept at the top level. These are some common scripts that people might use for don't destroy unload or some demo components and things. So these would be things that, yeah, any project could use these. But then if I have something belonging to a sub-project that's going to be in its own namespace, then I'm probably going to have its own prefabs in here and its own scripts in here, and all of these things will likely belong to that same namespace. And Scarecrow here I didn't. Oh, I did. Yeah, okay. And here I did. Okay, so all those are in that common namespace, so they all know about one another. Nobody else would accidentally use these because you'd have to use the namespace for them. There you go. Okay, that was just a little tidbit for the day. A useful technique that if you are in need of using multiple classes of the same name, perhaps, or you want to use something a little bit more elaborate, or you're packaging. This really comes in useful when you are creating packaged assets. So if you have scripts that you're packaging to give somebody else that may have common names like player controller or like enemy or things like that, those in particular, it's useful to have their own namespaces for that sort of thing, so that when you import that into another project, you don't have to worry about conflicts. Right, so that's one kind of cool thing to do that with. All right, hope this helps with other things work. Take care and have a great weekend.